All right, our first row has finished. So the first thing I need to do is bring my needle up and pull back, grab that thread, come back and bring the needle back down and up so that I can bring up that bobbin thread. We want to clip it off. Now I'm going to move the machine completely out of the way. And I want to reiterate, I learned a lot from Valerie at VG Quilting. I really recommend you guys go to her site, check out her videos, check out what she does. Maybe some of my tips and tricks help, and maybe the way she does things is more helpful. I definitely do not want to be taking credit for someone else's ideas. Anything though that other things that I'm saying are not things I learned from Valerie. They're things that I've just learned just from trial and error with having this being my second long arm machine. I also have a commercial embroidery machine, and a lot of these techniques like restarting from a thread break and things like that are the exact same thing on the embroidery machine that I've had for the last 5-6 years, I guess. So a lot of these techniques are not, I'm not stealing someone else's ideas. I definitely want to give credit where credit is due. I just want to make that clear because someone has reported to Valerie that I am using her things I've learned from her and not giving her credit. So I want to make that abundantly clear. I never would knowingly, willingly take credit for something that's not my idea. So with that said, I'm undoing everything. I'm undoing my bungees. I'm undoing, taking all the tensions off because I need to advance the quilt to get ready to sew the next row. So I want to move my machine completely out of the way while I adjust my quilt. And I don't need to undo the latch on the top bar, but I do on the bottom. So I can roll down the quilt just a little bit. And I'm going to start rolling it up on the back. Roll this down. Now the trick is rolling it up far enough to do your next row, but not too far for setting your safe area. And if we roll it too far for our safe area, the machine is going to tell us it can't sew, that everything is outside the safe area. So I want to straighten everything. Valerie does this in her video as well, but this is something I learned years ago from just doing quilts. And I'm just going to make sure your batting is straight. I got a couple of little picks there where I pulled it with my fingers. Make sure your batting is straight. Let's pull this quilt back down and make sure our quilt is straight. And pull this. Okay, we're just kind of get things straightened out. Make sure there's no kinks and wrinkles. And now Valerie in her video, she will repin her sides to do her basting. I don't. I just use my bungee to make sure my rows are in order. But I'm pinning or basting such a smaller area here. I don't really find it necessary to pin. You might find that technique more helpful, which is great. Again, I'm not trying to take credit from anybody. I feel bad that someone thinks I would do that. I'm just trying to be helpful to show people as well what I know and how I do things. So let me reclamp. Probably should have checked with my bungee before I clamp, but I can always adjust if I need to. All right, I'm going to take my bungee. This bungee comes from allthingsquilty.com. If I did not already say that, I learned about this bungee system from Valerie off of her Facebook page. So I definitely want to say that because I did not say that before. But it comes from All Things Quilty. All right, so now I can see I should not have put my clamps on. You learn as you go. Because my quilt is not straight based on where my bungees are at. So let me just kind of start straightening. That needs to come to the left. This makes such a critical difference in how your quilt finishes if you keep it straight. You adjust that to the left. So my toggles there are good. My toggle here is good. This one I'll adjust a little more. Okay. All right, so I feel confident now that my quilt is straight based on these toggle systems just make such a huge difference. I got a hair there, apologize, got hair on my quilt. All right, so let's put our rail clamps back on. And rail clamps back on. I don't remember if Valerie uses clamps in her videos or not. Honestly, I can't remember. These are something I've been using for a few years. I only found Valerie's website a couple of months ago, and I learned so much about keeping my quilt straight from her. Okay, so now let's get ready to baste down our sides before we reset our design. Just going to get that out of the way really quick. Just going to come back up here. Going to go back up to the BSR3 setting on the machine. I'm still using 4 stitches per inch, which also Valerie recommends. You can use, if you plan on pulling your basting stitches out, you can use the 1 or 2 stitches per inch setting. All right, hold my bobbin thread. Let's quilt down. So see, it's just a small area there that I need to baste. Whoops. Right on the edge. Cut my bobbin. Let's come over here and baste the other side, and we're going to be restarting from this side, so I'll leave it over there. I'm just going to clip these strings off here. All right, pull the bobbin thread up, which is right there, and start basting. All right, now we want to reset our design. So we need to pick a spot on our previous design that we can easily identify. So for me, I can easily identify, I don't know if you can see this section right here where this little point is. I'm going to put my laser as close to that as I can get it. I have to kind of like shake my machine to get it to move. All right, I want my laser dot right there at the top of that point, because then I'm going to be able to find that on the computer screen. So let's put the foot back on. Let's go over here. Yes, we know sewing is complete. All right, it still thinks we're on the first row. So now we need to come over here to sew options, DQ everything, select our second row. So we hit select, click the second row. That's what we want to quilt. Tell it to cue that and hit OK. All right, so now we need to trim the vertical sides of this design. So I'm going to select it, hit my trim, vertical, invert, so I can trim the left side. All right, and then trim, vertical, don't invert. Click the right side, trim. So now we're set for that. So now I need to zoom way in and find a point on my design, which we already know. Let me zoom in where you can see this better, I hope. Which I already said. Right here where you see this V shape in the design, that is where my needle is currently sitting. So I need to tell the software that's where my needle is sitting. So I'm going to click on Realign Safe Area, snap to point. I'm going to click a dot as close as I can to that point, which is right there, and tell it OK, and zoom out. And everything looks really good. So one thing I look for is if I see any of the red part of this design above the safe area, I already know I've advanced my quilt too far back, and I'm not going to be able to quilt it unless I pull it back forward some. Luckily, I didn't do that this time. Everything in the red is within that red box, so it's within my safe area, which means I should be good to go. I'm just going to hit the start button. It's going to tell me at start point. Now, if I was outside the safe area, I'd get the warning. Your quilt is outside your safe area. And I would know then, okay, I've got to advance my quilt back a little bit. I went too far, or whatever the case may be. But we're ready to go. So we're just going to keep doing that same process throughout the entire quilt until I get to the very last row. The last row of the quilt that will not fit under my quilt clamps. I'm going to repeat the process of pinning that down to the batting and the backing so that I can baste it. So I will come back and show you that process once I get to that point. And again, I learned the whole pinning technique from Valerie. It is an exceptional way of making sure your quilt stays straight, and that when you end your quilt, you don't end up with a whole bunch of extra fabric that you've got to figure out how to work in. So I will come back when I get to the end of my quilt.